My story takes place 2 years ago, between the first containment in France. I was home alone in my small apartment, working on something for my internship that I was freaking stressed about. It was the beginning of the afternoon, 2 p.m. I think. Someone knocked on my door, but I wasn't expecting anyone. I went to open up, and it was a guy I knew. Let's call him Jim. Jim and I had slept together a few times a few weeks before, until he pushed me away without explanation. We were still friends, but I was a little hurt. Was I that bad? Had he gotten what he wanted and wasn't interested anymore? I didn't dare ask the question because I was getting a little attached, and I preferred to wait for it to pass, especially since we were bound to run into each other again. Indeed, Jim had recently got a room in the flat of a friend of mine. The situation was quite funny because he had stumbled upon the ad without knowing that I knew the other tenants, and my friend didn't know yet that I knew the new roommate. I was going to tell her about it in person when we met again in college for our midterms. I knew I was going to see Jim again, but I didn't expect to run into him so soon after he moved in, let alone during a surprise visit from him to my apartment. I asked him what he was doing here, and he said he was bored at the dorm and was just passing through. I invited him in. I was a bit uncomfortable because I still liked him, and we had split without any explanation about his rejection before he moved in with my friend. We talked for a while about trivial things, but strangely enough, I still remember the main points. Then he wanted to show me a new kind of massage to help with my stress that he had seen on TikTok. I hesitated a bit, as I was still uncomfortable. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. I sat on the floor, and he touched my back for a while, then once I was lying down. I don't remember everything, except that at one point his arm was around my neck, and I thought, I'm not sure I can breathe. Shortly after, I blacked out. Of course, the memory of choking didn't come back right away. It took several months, but I'm trying to tell you the story in chronological order. When I came to, it was dark. I was still on the ground, bleeding. I don't remember if I noticed the injury right away, but I had a large hole in my right side and many cuts underneath. The events are pretty fuzzy in my memory, but I wondered where Jim had gone and why I was alone. I went to look in the hallway, but my keys, which are normally always in the lock, were missing. I found the spare and looked outside. No one was there. Then I had my first stupid reflex. I thought, I'm hurt, I need to disinfect, and started to take a shower. I think I fell asleep and had nightmares of being tortured and kidnapped in the shower, probably a way for my brain to try and warn me that something bad was happening. I then looked for my phone, which was also missing from the apartment. I was confused, and probably drugged, which I realized later, so I decided to go to bed to resume the search after resting. I told myself, if I'm still hurt when I wake up, it must be real. It seemed very logical in my mind at that moment. When I woke up, my mind was already a little clearer, but I was still not totally myself. It was around 8 or 9 p.m., I think, and I was still bleeding. I looked for my phone again, and I started to panic as I couldn't find it. I tried to calm down. I told myself that it was probably there somewhere. I just had to ask someone to call me. I contacted my best friend, let's call him Tom, via Messenger through my computer. I still had a hard time unlocking my computer. I couldn't type my code. I think I was still drugged. Luckily, Tom was online. He tried to call me on my phone, but no ringing could be heard in the apartment. I think he figured out that I wasn't in my right mind because he called me on Messenger to see if I was okay. It was he who gave me the details of our conversation. I have almost no memory of it. I said, "If you think you've been hurt, do you call the fire department or the police first?" He freaked out. and asked me to explain what was going on. I was very confused, but I think he got the gist of it. He asked, "Did Jim do this to you?" I don't know. Maybe. I was still in denial at that point. Tom called the police for me. He couldn't come to help me himself because he was studying in another city. As I waited for the cops to arrive, I began to realize that I had completely messed up the crime scene by touching everything looking for my phone. Not to mention the shower and the nap, which could have killed me in retrospect. I was still in no pain though. The hole in my side started to hurt when I was taken care of by the paramedics that the cops called when they saw the extent of my injuries. I had to undergo surgery as a result of this assault, which took me months to accept as an attempted murder with a knife. I had a hole in my liver, a pneumothorax, and was bleeding a lot. Luckily, my other organs were not affected. While I was in the hospital, the cops came to take my statement and took Jim into custody. Imagine the surprise of my friend and her roommates when they found out that the new roommate not only knew me, but was also accused of assaulting and robbing me. 1 week after the assault, when I got out of the hospital, the first bad news was that the cops had not been able to retrieve the recordings from the surveillance cameras in my building, which had already been erased because the procedures had been too long. The next day, the policewoman in charge of the investigation told me that, of course, Jim denied having been at my place that day, and nobody was at the flat to confirm if he was indeed at home all day. That's it for now. Go home to your parents and get some therapy. Great. Big up to my psychologist, who's an incredible person and helped me a lot. And then I waited. For a long time. I had to have the seals from my building analyzed for Jim's DNA. Without video or witnesses, it was the only way to prove that he was my attacker. Or at least, that he was in my apartment that day. It took 1.5 years to get the prosecutor's verdict. No further action. No identifiable DNA other than mine had been found at the crime scene. I probably destroyed everything with the shower. So, there you have it. We can't pursue the investigation. I can never prove it was Jim. I don't have any memory of the assault itself. I don't think I'll ever find them. But I have no doubt that Jim did this to me. I think if I ran into him, I would freeze like a rabbit in front of a car. Today, I am much better, but I still suffer from PTSD. For a while, I couldn't drink alcohol because the drunken feeling reminded me of when I was going to be unconscious. Now I only panic when I'm with someone and have trouble breathing. I can't pull a blanket over my face if I'm in bed with my boyfriend, for example. And most of all, it makes me sick to know that Jim is free to live his life and to hurt someone else. This happened a few months ago, in the McDonald's at Copenhagen Station. I am not Danish, only visiting the country for 1 day, and since I wanted to travel cheap, I decided to take the cheapest bus there, which just so happened to be the one arriving at 11 p.m. the day before. I thought I could save even more money by not renting a bed somewhere, and instead spending the night awake, or half asleep, at the station, do my business the next day, and sleep long and well on the bus back home. This McDonald's is open 24/7. I pretty early discovered that the station was too cold for me to get some shut-eye, so I went inside and bought a coffee and sat down at an empty table. Plenty of lighting and semi-drunk people to keep me awake, I thought. I should also add that I'm 23 and female. After some while of sitting in my spot, a strange guy walked over and placed a full cup of soda on my table. He said in Danish something I believe meant, "I ate my food already. I didn't drink any. You should have it instead." I'm Swedish, and although some Swedes understand Danish perfectly well, I have some difficulties doing so this is just a guess. Anyway, I didn't really pay much attention to the cup after it was put on my table. just wrote it off as some random drunk trying to flirt. But I noticed that in front of me a table away sat another guy, and he was watching me closely, because we did lock eyes at times. I looked up to peek at him. This creeped me out. I really didn't like being watched like this, and he just sat there for nearly an hour, even though he had no food in front of him. In the end, this dude stood up and walked over to me, and I cursed internally, thinking I'd have to defend myself and tell him to leave. But he turned, and there stood the guy that had left the soda cup on my table. He told the soda guy to leave after pushing the soda cup back into his arms, and that he didn't want to see him anywhere near this place again. Then he turned to me and explained, in English, that soda guy had walked by my table several times, glancing at me and the cup, and probably was waiting for me to drink it. He said he'd finished his meal a while ago, and just stayed to watch over me, but finally had to leave, but not before reminding me to be careful. I hadn't even noticed soda guy supposedly pacing by. I was too fixated on this other dude, who just happened to be the good guy watching over me. Who knows what was in that soda? And what would have happened should I have gotten really thirsty and drank some of it? So, thank you, McDonald's guy, who watched over me. As for you, soda guy, let's not meet.